The illusion of safety and silence there is a quiet kind of suffering that few people notice, and fewer dare to name the suffering of being too silent for too long. It doesn't announce itself with violence or chaos. Instead, it drapes itself over your life like a protective cloak, whispering promises of safety and peace. It tells you that silence is smart, that silence is calm, that silence is how you survive. And for a while, you believe it. You learn to withhold your thoughts, to shrink back from disagreements, to nod when you want to protest, to smile when you want to scream. At first, this silence feels like control. You are the one who avoids conflict, who keeps things smooth, who doesn't stir the waters. But slowly, that control becomes something else, a prison. You find yourself in rooms where you are not seen, in conversations where your voice never arrives, in decisions where your opinion was never even an option. And yet, you remain quiet. Because deep down, you've convinced yourself that speaking will cost you more than staying silent. But what if the opposite is true? What if silence is not your protection, but your self-erasure? We are not born afraid to speak. Watch any child and you'll see it: raw expression, relentless curiosity, the instinct to be heard. But that instinct is fragile. It bends under criticism, under rejection, under shame. A child who's told they are too loud, too opinionated, too emotional learns quickly to hide their voice. And that lesson, once learned, is carried quietly into adulthood. You don't stop having thoughts, you just stop sharing them. You don't stop feeling, you just stop expressing. And with each moment of silence, you retreat further into yourself, until one day you wake up and realize that your presence has become optional. That you have built a life that accommodates everyone else's comfort except your own. This is the illusion of safety in silence. It looks like strength, but it is fear in disguise. It feels like peace, but it is suppression. And unless you question it, it will define the rest of your life, not by what you did, but by everything you were too afraid to say. 2. When you stop speaking, you start disappearing. Every time you choose silence over self-expression, you're not just avoiding a conversation, you're slowly erasing a part of who you are. The process is imperceptible at first. You stay quiet in a meeting because you're not sure your idea is good enough. You withhold a boundary in a relationship because you don't want to cause tension. You suppress a feeling because it might make someone uncomfortable. And each time you do, you tell yourself it's no big deal. But what you don't see is the accumulating cost. Every unsaid word becomes a tiny act of self-rejection. Over time, they pile up not outside you, but within. And what's being buried is not just a thought or a feeling, it's your identity. The world may not notice the shift immediately, but you do. You feel it in the growing sense of invisibility, in the moments when people talk over you, make decisions without you, or forget to ask what you want. You feel it when others assume your silence means agreement, when they define you by your compliance rather than your conviction. And the worst part is, you start to believe it too. You begin to internalize the message that your voice doesn't matter, that your ideas aren't needed, that your emotions are too much. And what began as a coping mechanism becomes a character trait. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who's quiet by choice and start seeing yourself as someone who is just quiet. But that's a lie. You weren't born this way. You became this way through repetition, through the accumulation of moments when you let fear override truth. Carl Jung called this the formation of the shadow self, the parts of you that are real but repressed, the fragments of identity you exile in exchange for acceptance. And as you bury those parts deeper, you don't just lose your voice, you lose your reflection. You wake up one day and realize you no longer know who you are, only who you've trained yourself to be. 3. The hidden message behind your silence is never neutral. It always says something, even when you intend it not to. And the person who hears its message most clearly is you. Every time you hold back your truth, you're not just protecting someone else's comfort, you're sending a message to yourself. A message that says, my thoughts don't matter. My needs can wait. My voice isn't worth hearing. And that message, repeated over time, becomes your internal truth. You may not speak it aloud, but it becomes the lens through which you view your entire existence. You start to doubt your instincts, hesitate in your decisions, and second-guess your worth. And what began as silence becomes self-doubt, then self-minimization, then self-erasure. This is how low self-esteem forms, not in a single moment of failure, but in the quiet repetition of self-denial. You tell yourself you're just being respectful, accommodating, flexible. But beneath that surface is a habit of shrinking, a life designed around making yourself smaller so others can feel larger. And the longer you do this, the more you forget that your needs, your feelings, and your perspectives are just as real as anyone else's. When people don't listen to you, it hurts. But when you stop listening to yourself, it's far more dangerous. Because it creates a fracture between who you are and who you pretend to be. You become the agreeable one, the easy one, the supportive one. And yet inside, there's frustration building frustration that has no voice, no outlet, no language. Eventually, it curdles into resentment. Not just toward others, but toward yourself for not standing up, for not pushing back, for not making your truth known. And that resentment is corrosive. It doesn't scream. It seeps. It hollows out your sense of value until all that's left is performance, a version of you that exists only to keep others happy, while your real self waits quietly in the dark for a moment that never comes. 4. Quiet people attract the wrong kind of attention when you choose silence over expression. You may think you're avoiding conflict or controversy, but what you don't realize is that silence has its own consequences. In a world that rewards those who assert themselves, the quiet person becomes an easy target not for praise, but for manipulation. Silence is read as compliance. It is interpreted as passivity, as weakness, as someone whose boundaries are flexible, whose needs are negotiable. And that is exactly how those who wish to control you see it. They see silence as an invitation to define you, to push their agenda, to take advantage of your unspoken acquiescence. Manipulators and controlling individuals thrive on the silence of others. They recognize it for what it is, a gap they can fill with their own needs and desires, a space where they can impose their will without resistance. This isn't just a matter of poor judgment, it's a matter of power dynamics. When you don't speak up, you give others the permission to fill the silence with their own voices. You allow them to write your narrative, to dictate your actions, to shape who you are. And what happens when those people are not acting in your best interest? You lose. You lose your autonomy, your sense of agency, your ability to define yourself. You become a puppet to someone else's strings, a shadow of the person you were meant to be. Nietzsche once said, "He who cannot command himself must obey." And that is the harsh reality of silence. When you don't command your own voice, others will command it for you. And when you allow your silence to define you, you invite others to shape your life not by your choice, but by theirs. But here's the truth no one tells you: your silence is not your weakness. It is simply an unclaimed strength. It's not too late to take it back, to stand up, to break free from the chains you've quietly allowed to bind you. The power to speak has always been yours, and when you reclaim it, the wrong kind of attention no longer has power over you. 5. The curse of being nice at first. Being nice seems like a virtue. It's the quality that makes you likable, the one that smooths over tensions and brings people together. You're the one everyone turns to for help, the one who listens, the one who always accommodates. It feels good, at least it does in the beginning. But over time, this constant giving, this bending to others' needs at the expense of your own, starts to erode something inside of you. What began as kindness starts to morph into self-betrayal. You become so focused on making sure everyone else is happy that you lose touch with what makes you happy. Your wants and needs become secondary, an afterthought in the service of others. The problem with being nice is that it often means avoiding conflict, suppressing your true feelings, and ignoring your own boundaries. You tell yourself that it's easier to stay quiet than to speak up, that it's less painful to give in than to assert yourself. But what you don't realize is that this avoidance comes at a great cost: your self-respect. You start to believe that your own desires, your own feelings, are less important than those of the people around you. And with each compromise, each moment of silence, you slowly diminish your own sense of worth. Love, friendship, and even professional relationships built on self-sacrifice are fragile. They thrive not on the illusion of selflessness, but on the foundation of mutual respect and honesty. But when you silence your own voice to make others comfortable, you build a relationship that is, at its core, inauthentic. It may feel like love, but it's not. It's self-deception. And then eventually, you begin to feel resentful not because others have taken advantage of your kindness, but because you've allowed it. The curse of being nice is that it traps you in a cycle of self-denial, where the only person who suffers is you. True kindness is not found in silence or in submission. It is found in the courage to speak your truth, to set your boundaries, and to respect your own needs as much as you respect the needs of others. 6. Silence makes you invisible in the modern world, in a world that increasingly values expression. Silence has become a form of invisibility. We live in an age where those who speak, those who assert themselves, are the ones who get noticed. And those who remain silent, no matter how talented, insightful, or capable they may be, are overlooked. The workplace is a prime example. It's not enough to be good at your job. If you don't make your achievements visible, if you don't assert your value, if you don't raise your hand and speak up, you will remain unnoticed, stuck in the background. The world rewards visibility. It rewards those who make their presence felt, who actively participate, who take up space. But what happens to those who stay quiet? They become invisible. Their contributions go unrecognized, their potential untapped, and their value unacknowledged. And over time, they begin to accept this as their reality. They may be the most skilled, the hardest working, the most dedicated, but if no one knows, if no one hears them, it doesn't matter. They fade into the background, a shadow of who they could be. But silence doesn't just affect your career, it affects your sense of self-worth. When you don't speak up, when you don't assert your ideas, your needs, your desires, you send a message to yourself, I don't matter. And as this message sinks in, it starts to shape your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who deserves to be heard. You begin to accept your invisibility as inevitable, as natural, as something that just is. But the truth is, silence is not inevitable. It is a choice. And every time you choose silence, you give away a little more of yourself. The more you fade into the background, the harder it becomes to step forward again. But here's the good news. Visibility is not something reserved for the loudest, the most outspoken, or the most charismatic. It's something anyone can claim. It begins with the simple decision to speak, to be heard, to step into your own light. When you do, the world will start to see you. And more importantly, you will start to see yourself. 7. The body remembers what the voice suppresses. Every thought, every feeling, every emotion you choose to suppress doesn't simply disappear. It gets stored. Not in some abstract mental space, but deep within your body. When you swallow your words, when you push your feelings down, your body doesn't forget. It holds onto them tightly, persistently manifesting the unspoken in ways you can no longer ignore. Stress, anxiety, even physical pain can all be traced back to the emotions and thoughts you refuse to express. This is where the mind-body connection becomes undeniable. Psychologists have long studied the effects of emotional suppression, and the results are alarming. People who routinely hold back their true feelings experience higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. Their bodies stay in a constant state of tension, responding to the emotional weight they refuse to release. You feel it in the tightness in your chest, the knot in your stomach, the constant ache in your back. These are not just physical discomforts, they are your body's way of trying to process what your mind refuses to acknowledge. But there's more. The longer you suppress your emotions, the more this internal pressure builds up. What was once a subtle discomfort becomes an overwhelming burden. It starts as fatigue, as if you're carrying a weight that no one can see but you. Then comes the mood swings, the irritability, the sense that you're not in control of your own emotions. Eventually, it might manifest in more severe symptoms, panic attacks, chronic pain, digestive issues, and even autoimmune diseases. These are the body's cries for release, for acknowledgement, for the permission to feel. And yet, when we choose silence, we silence our bodies too. The longer we suppress, the more our body rebels, sending us signals that we can no longer ignore. It's not just about mental health, it's about physical health too. Every time you choose silence, you are not just erasing your voice, you are erasing your body's voice as well. And if you continue this cycle, the silence will no longer be passive. It will be a ticking time bomb. But here's the truth. When you begin to speak, when you give your emotions the freedom to surface, your body starts to heal. The tension loosens, the pain recedes, and you feel the weight begin to lift. Speaking is not just a release for the mind, it's a release for the body. And when you reclaim your voice, you reclaim your health, your life, and your freedom. 8. Learned helplessness, the psychological trip over time. Silence doesn't just become a habit, it becomes a trap. A psychological state where you stop trying to change your circumstances because you've convinced yourself that nothing will ever be different. This is what psychologists refer to as learned helplessness. It happens when someone has endured repeated failures, disappointments, or the sense that their voice doesn't matter so often that they begin to believe they have no power to change things. When we stay silent in situations where we should speak up, when we accept mistreatment, overlook our own needs, or stay in toxic relationships, we start to internalize the belief that there's no point in trying. We stop taking action because we believe nothing will ever improve. And this, over time, leads to a form of emotional paralysis. Just as a dog that has been shocked repeatedly in an inescapable cage eventually stops trying to escape, we stop trying to assert ourselves. We stop believing in our own agency. We start to accept whatever happens, because we've been trained to believe that speaking up doesn't make a difference. This learned helplessness doesn't just affect how we act, it affects how we see ourselves. We begin to view ourselves as powerless, as victims of circumstances, and the more we stay silent, the more we reinforce that identity. It's a vicious cycle, one that is incredibly difficult to break. The longer we stay in this state, the more we believe that we are not worth the effort. But here's the thing, learned helplessness is not the truth. It is a lie that we've told ourselves. And breaking free from it begins with the simple, terrifying act of speaking up, of reclaiming the belief that your voice has power. Because once you recognize the truth that your silence is not a shield, but a prison, you can start to dismantle it, piece by piece. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but the first step is always the hardest, to stop believing that your voice doesn't matter, and to start using it again. The world will not change for you unless you change it. But that change begins with your voice. 9. You were never born to be silent. There's a profound truth hidden in the silence. You were never meant to be quiet. The silence you've come to accept, the silence that has slowly shaped your life, was not a natural state. You were not born to shrink, to hold back, to remain invisible. As children, we instinctively express ourselves. We speak when we need something, ask questions when we are curious, share our emotions when we feel them. And at that point in our lives, our voices are not stifled by fear. They are raw, unfiltered, and they exist because they need to. But as we grow, we begin to learn that not all voices are welcome. We are taught to be polite, to be considerate, to avoid causing discomfort. And somewhere along the way, that teaching turns into a pattern that tells us to remain silent when we should speak, to suppress our emotions when they are too much, to hide parts of ourselves that don't fit neatly into society's expectations. We convince ourselves that silence is safer. We tell ourselves that speaking up is too risky, too vulnerable, too dangerous. And over time, we become so comfortable with this silence that we start to forget that we ever had a voice at all. But here's the most important thing you need to remember. Silence is not your natural state. It is not a reflection of who you truly are, but a construct, a learned behavior born out of fear, out of insecurity, out of self-preservation. The truth is, you were born to express. You were born to be seen, to be heard, to take up space. And no matter how long you've been silent, no matter how deeply you've buried your voice, it is still yours to reclaim. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to stop pretending that your voice is unimportant, that your presence doesn't matter. You were never born to be silent. Your voice has always had power, and the moment you decide to use it again, you will begin to remember who you really are. 10. Speak, because your life is too sacred to be whispered. This is where it all comes together: the choice, the transformation, the awakening. Your silence, once a shield, is now a weight. And the question is no longer, how do I stay safe? The question is, how do I start living again? Because silence is no longer serving you. It's no longer protecting you. It's holding you back from the life you deserve. And here's the harsh truth. If you don't use your voice, the world will decide your story for you. It will shape your life based on its own needs and desires, not yours. But it doesn't have to be this way. You have a voice. You have the power to speak up, to express yourself, to claim the space that is rightfully yours. Every time you speak, you reaffirm your existence. You remind the world that you are here, that you have something to say, that you are worthy of being heard. And with each word, each sentence, each declaration of truth, you will see the world begin to shift. You will see your relationships deepen, your career open up, your self-worth rise. But it begins with a choice to stop hiding, to stop shrinking, to stop allowing fear to control your voice. So, ask yourself now, will you stay silent or will you finally speak? The world is waiting for your voice. Your life is too sacred to be whispered. Don't let it go unheard any longer. Start today. Speak, because your voice matters. If this message resonated with you, take the first step today. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let the world hear your voice. If you're ready to break free from silence, share and subscribe for more empowering content. Remember, your voice is not just important, it's essential. Speak up. Your life depends on it.